every Smite god's total damage output in one video. So let me lay down some ground rules real quick before we start so you all know how I'm judging these. This will be based solely on the god's 4 abilities and passives if they apply. No bonus damage from items or basic attacks, but if there's an interaction like Morrigan's 2 and 1 for instance, where there's more damage if used in a certain order or a certain way, I will of course take the higher number in that case. And this is just raw damage output, not taking into account enemy protections or anything like that. Abilities have scaling as well as base damage, so I'll be using these 2 builds, one for magical and one for physical, to calculate scaling. These are the highest power builds possible for both types to make it reasonably fair. Of course, these aren't actually realistic builds. This video isn't meant to be an accurate representation of Smite, it's just for fun. And also, as I said, I'm not including any item effects, so anything like Staff of Muradin or Rangda's Mask bonus damage, I won't be counting anything like that. Also, no power potions, jungle buffs, or fire giant. I know you're probably hating me already for not starting yet, but one final thing, please do drop a like if you enjoy this video. Calculating damage numbers for over 100 different gods, all with 4 or more different abilities, literally took like 10 hours, so any support is greatly appreciated on this one. Thank you. Achilles, 2,738 damage. Notably, Achilles has some big power boosts in his kit, so he's actually operating at 528 power instead of 420. Agni, 6,507 damage. Notably, his 1 does a lot of damage if you stand in it for the entire duration, and of course all 3 bombs do a lot as well. Amuzenkab, 2,845 damage. Apwash, 5,563 damage. This is mostly coming from his ultimate and his 3 actually, because the way I calculated Corpse Explosion was just with 3 corpses, because it's like a full kit rotation. So you'd use his 1, then his 3, that creates 3 corpses, and then you Corpse Explosion on that. But if you were Corpse Explosioning on more than 3 corpses, this damage number would go up. Amaterasu, 3,209, operating at 450 power instead of 420 because of the passive aura. Anhur, 3,536, coming mostly from the ultimate here. Here's an interesting one. Anubis, 10,683. Obviously coming mostly from that ultimate, doing almost 6,000 damage. Ao Kuang, 4,743, mostly coming from the 2. Aphrodite, 2,388. This is actually surprisingly high given she has 2 non-damaging abilities and no damage on the passive either. Apollo, 2,342. Arachne, 2,899. Notably with Arachne, the broodlings actually do a lot of damage if you stand in them for the full duration. Ares, 3,586. Of course, this is coming mostly from his chains. Artemis, 1,951. This is very low due to Artemis having no damage on the passive or the 2, and her 3 also does very low damage. Artio, 3,048. Of course, there's no damage on Artio's passive 2 or ultimate, but she does have 2 1s and 2 3s, so she actually gets a fairly high damage number. Athena, 3,963. A surprisingly high amount of damage on the ultimate and the 3 here, but obviously no damage on the taunt. Awilix, 3,092, operating at 546 physical power if she strikes first out of combat instead of 420. Bacchus, 3,223, once again operating at a higher power value of 1,052. Bakasura, 1,995. I notably only took the damage from the minions from his ultimate here and not from auto-attacking, and also I just took the true damage from Butcher Blaze and not considered any auto-attack damage, that's why this is quite low. Baron Samedi, 5,134. All of Baron's abilities do quite a lot of damage, but the ultimate was where most of it came from. Bastet, 6,952. Most of it coming from the ultimate, because if you just put cats on someone and let them attack them for the full 10 seconds, it does a lot of damage. Bellona, 3,208, nothing too special here other than bludgeon doing a lot. Cabrakan, 11,281, this is coming mostly from his 3, because if you just activate Cabrakan 3 for the full duration, it does so much damage. Any of you who have watched my previous top 5 highest damaging abilities videos will know about this one. Kamatots, 3,469 damage. Cerberus, 4,161 damage. Kononos, 2,533 damage. It's also worth mentioning here that for abilities that can technically do infinite damage, like the Summer Heat form on Kononos with no cooldown, I just take 4 instances of damage from that. So I took 4 Summer Heat basic attacks and added that damage on for Kononos. Jack, 2,270 damage. Changa, 2,684 damage. Chernobog, 2,281, notably no damage on Chernobog's ultimate, but the rest of his kit has reasonable damage to make up for it. Chiron, 3,191 damage, sort of the opposite of Chernobog here. His ultimate does a lot of damage, but the rest of his kit doesn't do quite as much. Kronos, 2,372, notably no damage on his 2 or his ultimate, but still gets a reasonable damage number here because of the crazy damage on his 1 and his 3, and also operating at a higher power value due to his passive. Cuchulainn, 4,886 damage. This damage number is notably quite high because he has double abilities basically. Cupid, 2,188 damage. This is also quite impressive considering his 2 and his 3 both deal no damage. Daji, 4,276 damage, most notably her ultimate does quite a lot. Discordia, 4,292, operating at 1,092 magical power instead of 1,022 due to her passive. Erlang Shen, 2,128, this will be a lot higher but his ultimate doesn't do any damage. Fafnir, 5,767, just because he has duplicate abilities on his 1 and 3 and his ultimate actually does quite a lot of damage as well. Fenrir, 3,475 damage, operating at 500 instead of 420 physical power. Freya, 4,722 damage. Once again, like Kernanos, I just took 4 autos from Freya's 2 and just calculated it that way. Here's another interesting one you'll know about if you watch my top 5 highest damage abilities video. Ganesha, 10,826 damage. Almost all of this coming from the ultimate that does over 9,000 damage. Geb, 2,842. Guan Yu, 4,259, a lot of this coming from the ultimate. Hachiman, 2,094. Hades, 8,480. A lot of this is coming from the ultimate and from detonating the blights on the 3. Hebo, 4,412, operating at 1,175 magical power due to his passive. Hel, 2,938. Of course, her 2 and her ultimate in both stances do no damage, but her 1 and 3 make up for it. And once again, operating at a higher magical power value due to her passive on the ultimate. So here's probably the most interesting one of the video in my opinion. Hera, 18,711 damage. So you might consider this one a little bit cheaty, but I still kind of counted it. Hera's passive deals 15,000 damage. The reason for this being that if you just put Argus on someone, he has a 40-second lifetime, and if you just let Argus auto-attack you for 40 seconds straight, it will total out at 15,000 damage. So you could say that that's not really realistic and it's kind of cheaty, but if I'm considering Kabrakan 3 for the full 10-second duration, I should probably consider Argus for the full 40 seconds. So yeah, Hera does 18,000 damage. Hercules, 3,233. For the ultimate, I consider the initial damage and 1 bounce. Horus, 3,116. Huyi, 5,200, basically coming all from the 1 ricochet triple bounce and the ultimate. Hunbats, 2,696. Demonetize, 6,422. Most of that coming from the ultimate and from Wingust. Izanami, 1,983. Janus, 5,073 damage. This coming mostly from the max range ultimate, but also quite a bit from the 2 and portal as well. Jingwei, 2,020 damage, which is surprisingly competitive given she has 2 non-damaging abilities and nothing on the passive. Jormungandr, 5,962 damage. This is coming mostly from the ultimate that does over 3,000. Kali, 2,019. This is kind of just a given. Kali's not meant to really be an ability-based character, so she will be quite low. Khepri, 2007, notably an ultimate that deals no damage, which usually results in quite a low number unless they're a stance switcher. Speaking of stance switchers, King Arthur, 6,266 damage. This is purely just because he has double abilities in every slot. Kukulkan beating out Arthur by 6 damage at 6,272. Also operating at a much higher magical power value due to his passive mana conversion. If you stand in the tornado for the full damage, it does over 3,700 damage with this build, so that's where a lot of this is coming from. Kumbhakana, 3,171. Kusambo, 5,174, coming mostly from pushing people through minion waves with the 3 and into walls. Loki, 3,084, nothing special here really. Medusa, 3,222. Mercury, 2,096. Merlin, 10,305 damage. Obviously Merlin's blink has no damage, but he still manages 10,000 damage because he has a passive that does damage, the ultimate also does damage, and then he has effectively 4 abilities on top of that. Because I was basically taking this as using your abilities once, rotating through the ultimate once, using your abilities again. I didn't consider all 3 stances for this. And for the record, the stances that I used were Blizzard and Fire because they're the highest 2 damage stances. Naja, 4,148, coming mostly from the ultimate. Neith, 3,552. Nemesis, 2,064, operating at a higher power value due to her passive. Nike, 2,995, operating at 3 more physical power due to her passive. Nox, 6,519, once again operating at a higher magical power value due to the passive. And Nox is just a collection of all her abilities doing a lot of damage early. There's nothing standout, they all just do a lot. Noir, 6,163, once again all of her abilities just do a lot of damage. With Noir, it's actually the ultimates that's the most weak, because I'm only considering single target here, not hitting all 5 people. Odin, 2,181. Olorun, 2,410. Osiris, 2,009 damage. Pele, 3,412 damage, operating at higher physical power value of 445. Persephone, 3,498 damage. Obviously her 3 does no damage, but the rest of her abilities all make up for it by doing over 1,000. Poseidon, very rounded kit here with all of the abilities doing a good amount of damage, totaling out at 5,540. Ra, once again, all abilities do quite a lot here for 5,443. Raijin, 6,038 damage, mostly coming from the ultimate and quite a lot on the 1 as well. Rama, 2294 damage, which is quite impressive to say how heavily focused on auto attacks he is. Ratatoska, pretty well rounded here, 2676 damage, coming from basically all of his abilities. Raven, 2624 damage. Scylla, operating at a higher magical power value due to her passive, does 4634 damage. Serket, 3497, notably her passive does a lot of damage. Set, 4501, coming mostly from Skewer, because with a lot of clones that does a lot of damage. Skadi, 3914. Sobek, 3705, mostly on that ultimate doing over 1700. Sol, operating at 1226 magical power due to her passive, does 7852 damage, coming mostly from her 3 actually, and her ultimate. If you stand in the full trail of Sol 3 for the entire duration, it ends up doing a lot. Sun Wukong, 2848, operating at plus 50 physical power due to his passive. Susanoo, 3444. Sylvanas, 3169 damage, mostly from his ultimate. Terra, 4633. Thanatos, 2092, not very good for this guy. But notably, he is much of an early game character, and also I'm not counting executes for damage, so I just took Thanatos' ult base damage. So the Morrigan is another one that's kind of cheaty. I have it listed here as 13,352 damage, but that is adding her base kit on top of transforming into Ganesha and using his entire kit. Due to the time limit on Morrigan's transformation, you wouldn't be able to get off the full 40 seconds of Argus damage, so I can't just add Hera's damage here. So Ganesha was the highest damage I could add that actually has the time to use all the abilities, which adds 10,000 damage basically to her kit. But once again, you could say Morrigan's ult technically does no damage on one cast and you could put 0 there, so it really depends on how you want to look at this. For me, since I'm using Stan Switch's ults and using their other abilities, it only seemed fair to use Morrigan's ult in that way as well. Thor, 3665 damage, operating at plus 30 physical power. Thoth, 4213 damage, coming a lot from the ultimate there. Tyr, 3463 damage, notably quite low for a stance switcher. Speaking of low for stance switchers, Ulla does 2144 damage, but that is mostly due to his ultimate and his 2, both dealing no damage. Vamana, 1907. This is because obviously Vamana's ultimate is entirely tied to auto attacks, and having an ultimate that deals no damage is going to give you a quite low number, but there's not much that can be really done about that since I'm calculating damage off of abilities here. Vulcan, 6580. For the turret, because like Skadi's dog and all that kind of stuff, it can do infinite damage, I just took 4 ticks of the turret. Xbalanque, I believe this is actually the lowest damage on the list at 1622. Obviously, Xbalanque's bolas, I took 4 hits of those bonus damage, and the ultimate deals no damage at all, so he comes out with quite a low number. Jing Chen, 4454. Ymir, 4439, coming mostly from the ultimate. Zeus, 6931, once again coming a lot from his ultimate, doing over 3900 damage. And finally, Zhonghui does 4366 damage. And that's it. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Of course, it's not really meant to be taken very seriously, and it isn't an accurate representation of any of these gods' power levels, it's just for fun. If you did have fun watching, then don't forget to leave a like before you leave, and I'll catch you guys in the next video later on. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.